You might be asking yourself, with the second game now being out, should you still play the first? Well, as opposed to the new one being a, horror survival bit, supposedly, haven't played it yet, hoping to play it later today, which is really late to be making this video. Alan Wake is an action-adventure game with psychological thriller elements. It's not scary by any means, but it might have its moments. And honestly, it is one of my favorite games of all time. But let me just go back and do a bit of a sum up of what the game actually is. So, like I mentioned, it is, in my eyes, a psychological thriller, because Alan, throughout the story, as you progress, becomes more and more of an unreliable narrator. You are not sure as a player controlling him even, whether what happens to him is actually happening, or whether it might be a figment of his imagination, or maybe just he's a victim of circumstance suffering, great loss. The game is made by Remedy Studios, who you might know for the recently fantastic game Control, which is actually in the same universe as Alan Wake. So, even if you played the expansion, you might have experienced Alan's story there, or rather, the ending of it from the first game, and a little bit of build-up of what we might see coming. But if you haven't, you maybe know them for Max Payne, well, Max Payne 1 and 2, which I've never played in person, always wanted to, and maybe I'll fix that within the next year or so. But I did play free, and I know that, they had to sign some bits off while they were not developing it, and it is a really cool story with cool characters and cool settings. After developing number 1 and 2 especially, the studio decided to go in a bit of a different direction. Moving away from the detective noir stories of Max Payne, they went to a little idyllic town in the middle of the Pacific Northwest, following a writer, not a seasoned veteran. So how did that story shake up to be? Well, I can tell you, from start to finish, this game just reeks of atmosphere. This is what it set out to do. It sets out to create and tell a story to you, and that's what it does best. It has 3 difficulty settings, only 2 of them being available right from the get-go, requiring a second playthrough if you want to see everything there is to see, and whether that's worth it, it's really in the eyes of the beholder, but I'll come back to that a bit later. To know what sort of story you will experience, if you are a fan of Stephen King, who's even mentioned by name within the game's own intro, or Twin Peaks, this might be great for you. The game takes great inspiration from both these sources, as well as I would say a little bit of a Lovecraftian approach with a little bit of cosmic horror and unexplained things, insanity and all that. It is really brought together really well. The game is set, like I mentioned, in a small town called Bright Falls, which has more mysteries than you might think of just looking at its happy surface, and a mystery that really delves deep. So if you really follow this story and try to find out exactly what's happening and how it's happening, I think it leaves more questions unanswered than it answers. Hopefully some of those will be answered in the second game, but I also think that one will bring us even more questions, which I am looking forward to resolving. The story begins, like every great story should, with a dream, but then we are really awoken from it, having now boarded a ferry which is almost at its destination of Bright Falls. We look over, there's Alan's wife, because they're going together for a little break. They've been struggling with things within their relationship and they hope that they will fix them. Upon arrival, you quickly find out that, the town's very friendly, maybe even overly friendly, but there's also some weird individuals within it. And some more creepy, some a little confused maybe, so right off the bat, you are getting questions. It's like, what's exactly happening around? After picking up the keys to their lovely cottage stay, and we as the players know that they picked up the wrong key, a couple heads into the lovely birdleg cabin. You arrive, it's the sunset, it looks beautiful in a glimmer. Walk across the bridge, there's birds everywhere, it's a romantic little spot. A romantic little spot that's almost like a time capsule from way back when. We go in, have a look. I told a little bit more about the character of Alan and his wife, which we find out really soon is afraid of the dark. And so we got to go get the generator started. Once we do that, we settle in. And here is where we find out that Alice has a bit of an ulterior motive of bringing Alan to Bright Falls. And that is to help him overcome his writer's block. For you see, Alan is a writer, or rather was a great writer. He created a very engaging series of stories following the detective cases of Alan Casey, almost like Max Payne, which after finishing, he's completely blank. He's suffering from writer's block. He cannot come up with a new idea and cannot find the inspiration to produce more engaging works. So his wife decided to help him solve that issue. She found a specialist who lives in Bright Falls, contacted him, and brought Alan, hopefully getting him admitted almost to the center and helping him overcome his troubles. Alan, being the sort of person that he is, does not take kindly to that, and after an argument storms out the house in the middle of the night, for he knows his wife will not follow him into the dark. Yet, as he's crossing the bridge, there is a power outage within the cabin itself, and we hear a scream. He turns around, rushes there to save his wife. We are thrust right into a scene straight out of the Birds movie by Hitchcock, where devil swarms attack us from the sky all around as we try to make it into the cabin. As soon as we enter, we can see that the baluster overlooking the lake on the balcony is broken. Alan approaches it, having just heard a scream falling down, and sees a body within the what is his wife. So he dives right in. Next scene we see, he wakes up, wind on his head, in a car, dangling off a cliff, having crashed. No memory of what the heck just happened, but he is dry, and so we go out into the night. Now, the game follows a really interesting structure, for it is split almost into a TV show-esque style. It's neatly split in 6 main episodes with 2 DLC episodes. Therefore, if you're looking for shorter playtimes, you can very easily play the game about an hour to hour and a half at a time. As we progress through each of the episodes, we delve deeper and deeper into a mystery which has a lot of paranormal elements with it, from the enemies that we face, who are forces of evil covered by the darkness that dwell beneath the lake, beneath the city, and who are now coming up to make their own reality. And we get a little bit of almost clairvoyance. As we progress through the game, what we find are manuscript pages from a story written by Alan, one that he cannot remember writing. Yet the pages from this tell us of events that will happen. And he's not the only one that finds them, and that plays really interestingly into the development of the different side characters. And usually, soon after finding a page, the events might unfold. So a page might say that Alan is escaping from a axe-wielding murderer, and lo and behold, 10 minutes later, you hear laughing in the woods with an axe-wielding murderer hot on your heels as you slam the door, and you get a "here's Johnny" moment. And the writing around that is really great, because there is more than meets the eye, and around every corner, the world just kind of feels lived in. Things make sense. And you could say that for those who know where to look, there's plenty of little Easter eggs to be found. Now, what also carries this experience is the characters that Remedy created here. Alan is a likable enough hero. As you follow him, you see he's a man struggling, but the supporting cast really shines. They all have their own personalities, they all have their own morals, and they stick to those. Personalities don't change for no reason. You can see some people are dictated by the way the pages were written. They have no choice in their actions and end up victims to fate, whereas others do their best to fight against it. There are great characters that people might love or hate. Some of my favorites are Barry Wheeler, Alan's agent, who comes over to Bright Falls after not hearing from him or his wife for a while, so he wants to help. Sheriff Sarah Baker, she is a very strong character who builds further upon the world's mystery by mentioning things which are explored in the further entries from Remedy, and even the town's own DJ, Maine, as he mentions a lot of things on his little talk show that build the world around and let us know that there are people exploring and people are being affected by what's going on. And although everything is flipped on its head with Alan's arrival to the town, you hope that everything is just going to keep going on and work out for the best. So, how long will the game take you to beat if you decide to go in and undertake that adventure? I played the series now for around 60 hours. Mind you, I played through the game now fully 3 times, and that includes the initial release on Xbox 360, where I played through the normal mode and the nightmare mode, almost 100%ing the game, except for some of the collectibles. Then I played it again in 2018, where I've beat the game on normal and nightmare, almost collecting all the collectibles. And then last year, which was the first time, for some reason, that I've played the DLC. And after that, I've played the American Nightmare, which is a direct sequel, but you could almost call it a spin-off. For I'm not sure if all the things that happened there will be mentioned in Alan Wake 2, but I guess we'll only have to wait and find out. So overall, that took me, like I said, about 60, maybe 70 hours to do all that. And now I have actually 100%ed the game, which is a fun achievement. And I've 100%ed the DLC and American Nightmare. For you, though, I would say one solid playthrough of the game from start to finish, including the DLC, so that's 8 episodes in total, will take you, and I'm showing 7 because I'm an idiot, will take you somewhere in the region of 10 to maybe 15 hours, maybe 20 if you are really exploring and trying to collect all the collectibles, which there's no point in, mostly, but I'll get onto that soon. And like I mentioned, that experience can be easily split into the episodes that the game serves. So you can play from start to finish, as long as you dedicate about up to 2.5 hours, so you have some time to spare. You play, start to finish of the episode and then taking a break and then play it the next day, next weekend, in a month. Where that really shines is whenever you pick your session up again, you get a little previously on Alan Wake. The game catches you up on what happened last, so you will never forget what happened previously and be lost, even if you take a weeks or months long break with the game. And so you might be wondering, what is the gameplay actually like? Well, like I mentioned, being an action adventure game almost, an important part of it will be the combat. And while it does maybe feel a little bit stale by today's standards, especially having played newer releases out of Remedy, I can tell you that it is definitely good enough to hold you from start to finish of the adventure and not get bored with it. The main weapon you will utilize on your adventure and your aiming tool, which is where your reticle follows, will be your flashlight. You use your flashlight by focusing really hard and burning away the darkness covering your enemies. Because you see, when people and objects are possessed by the darkness, they are shrouded in an armor made out of it, and they cannot be harmed until we burn away the dark forces protecting them. And once that armor is gone, your variety of 4 weapons can quickly whittle the enemies down. And I know 4 doesn't sound like much, and it did feel throughout the journey that, you might need a little bit more, which is fixed actually in the American Nightmare. Because the weapons you do get on offer is a revolver, which is your most trusty weapons and most plentiful in ammo, but does take the most amount of hits to bring enemies down. You get a shotgun, a 2-shot shotgun, I don't know how to call them. You have a pump action shotgun, more bullets held, you can shoot on, and then you have a hunting rifle, which of course is a high impact bullet that you can shoot from further away. That is also supplemented by a flare gun, and the flare gun is a very interesting piece because what it does do is you can shoot your flare into a group of enemies and it will instantly obliterate the possessed with their force. On top of that, you do have accessories which can help you have a bit more breathing room, which is the flares. You pull them out any moment that you feel you need to, pushes the enemies back so they cannot come close to the light, and the great equipment of the electrical companies of Bright Falls apparently, which is flash grenades, which work very similar in the way that the flare gun does. If you hit an enemy directly with it, it will detonate straight away, obliterating them and most of the enemies around them, which is all brought together by a really cool cinematic dodge system, where if you get out of the way at the last possible moment using the specific button, you will get the time slowing down and giving you a chance to fight back, which is almost like Alan's Wake take of the bullet time from the Max Payne games, which a nice little throwback here. Now, where this kind of does feel a bit weird is in the way Alan moves. Don't get me wrong, he moves fine, but you almost feel like controlling someone much older than Alan is. It's a like semi-tank controls. He kind of is really focused. If you go in one way, turning around quickly can be a bit stiff, but maybe again that's more realistic. I don't know, it just something about it feels a little stiff, little odd, especially having the dodge and sprint same button. I don't know, that always threw me off just a little bit, but other than that it works really well. If you are injured within your bouts, light heals. And that's how the game serves also checkpoints. As you go through a little flash of light, you will be fully healed up. Now, something that I do not like as much with the game and the way it serves combat is the fact that your equipment gets reset in between every chapter. And while the story does tend to explain why it happens, it is a little annoying. So a suggestion I have if you do decide to play the games is just use everything, just have fun with it. There are a few moments where hanging on to, one or two flash grenades or a flare gun shot will help to clear out especially the harder enemies and boss encounters, but just use them. Don't feel like you have to stock onto them because they will be cleared as soon as your main goal in that chapter is reached and you get the end of episode screen rolling over. So the combat is pretty simple, but it definitely didn't get boring, at least for me, even with all these playthroughs. And I'm sure one of the reasons that it did not get boring is due to one of the things the game does best, which is atmosphere and its environment and story. You see, when the game started its development, they wanted to make it fully open world, but soon shifted their focus and decided, let's tell a brilliant story. And they've integrated it into every aspect of it. From the greatly written characters, engaging plot, to the environments. Environments which you will get to explore. And you can definitely still see those open world roots there. The environments are sprawling. There's plenty to see in them. Sometimes maybe even a bit too much, especially when you add the collectible system, which I'll talk about next. Because that leaves me wandering around every nook and cranny where there's sometimes nothing to see, especially in the more open levels, and feeling kind of disappointed and like I'm wasting my time instead of just following something right forward. But throughout that whole experience, when you're going through the story and you're going from A to B, doing the things that you need to do, the atmosphere is at the forefront. The level design is great. While it all happens around one town, you have enough of a variety of environments that you do not get bored. I mean, it is mostly forests, mines, and the like, but it is really fun to see, and especially the set pieces that you find within them. They add a lot to the variety. You might be going through the woods as the wind whistles through the trees around you, and then you hear a wig snap, and you right away know that that gas station in the distance is your safe place. You try to figure out a way of getting there, and you make it your priority. And linked directly to exploration is also an aspect which I think is one of the biggest negatives of the game, which is the collectible system. On one hand, you have great collectibles like the manuscripts. They progress the story, they give you an insight of what's happening and what might happen, and insights to the psychology of the main character. The signs spread around the town, little notes, placards, they build the world around you. Even the chests left behind by a cuckoo old lady give you supplies and are worth seeking out. But there's two kinds specifically in the base game that suck. And while one of them can be justified, it's just a fun activity, knocking down 12 pyramids across the 6 chapters, the coffee thermoses are just plain awful. There is 100 of them spread across the 6 episodes. They really drag you out of your way, and it feels like you are looking for them just to waste your time. They don't give you any benefits, there's nothing to be found by getting all of them collected, and really it just feels like wasting time for wasting time's sake. Many of them are even so out of the way, you end up you become paranoid, and sometimes even double the lengths of the episodes trying to find them. I would recommend, if you are an achievement hunter, play through the game normally, enjoy the ride, go into nightmare mode, where you will get access to all the missing manuscript pages. Some of them are unlocked only in nightmare mode, I did forget to mention that. And throughout that playthrough, since you already know what's bound to happen, bring up a guide and just follow it. The other side of more collectibles is also the TV shows and radio. They are both really good. They're not very hard to find. You'll usually stumble right across them. The radio pieces are led by the local DJ, and they just break down a little bits on bobs that are going around in the background of the city as you go exploring through the night. And they're very fun, entertaining little bits. Whereas the TV shows especially the Night Springs TV shows, really, really add to the world building. Some of those were written by Alan himself, so he can see the things that he worked on in the past, but they're crazy little skits which have big X-Files kind of approach to them, with otherworldly mysteries being explored within them, always asking a question, whether it's normal or if it's just their everyday life in Night Springs. And they tie in really nicely to the American Nightmare. Now, when you reach the end of the game, it finishes in quite an open manner. And that's where the DLC chapters come in. I believe they were initially like the first one of them was free, then you could buy it, but I actually somehow never figured out back when I was younger that there is a DLC, like, you know, it wasn't that common back then, and I probably wouldn't have bought it anyway, and then I just didn't have time and so on. But what the DLC is it takes you right into the dark place, continuing the story directly, and it covers Alan's efforts to battle against the forces of it and try to leave the place. And the story becomes more and more crazy, allowing the devs to be way more creative with their approaches and level designs, albeit with some questionable platforming, which I know people might not be the fan of, because until I figured it out, it kind of sucks, especially when you match it up against some of the achievements requiring you to go faster. But it takes on a whole new nightmarish perspective, playing on the insanity of our main character, and best of all, right at the end, teasing The Returnal, a new novel written by Alan himself, hinting at the continuation of the game. So many years ago, 13 years ago, and I've been waiting for number 2 since. I know they started working on it and that got dropped, and that looked, decently interesting, but now it's finally here. And I'll probably be playing it, before this video is out. So feel free to swing over by my streams and say hi and see my experiences with that. And I'll probably be making a second video around that. But before we move on that far, what came kind of in between to continue that story and, tell us more about it is the American Nightmare. Now, this was a Xbox arcade title, and while it is the direct continuation of the story, or rather a sequel, I would say it's more of a spin-off, because we don't know exactly where in the timeline it lies. We know that it's roughly 2 years after the events of the first game. However, it has a bit more of a goofy approach to things. Again, it's split into 3 main acts, which are across 3 different levels. And this time, we're involved into a episode of one of the TV shows I mentioned, Night Springs, as it goes more and more insane. And we are chasing a serial killer across a ever-evolving and crazy setting, which is a really fun take. It really moves on to something completely different. Yet I'm not sure how it fits into the whole journey, or maybe it's just an effort of Alan to, comprehend what's going on in the place that he is at that moment, because I'm not sure how they're going to continue off of it. He seems to be in a much better place than he ended at the end of Alan Wake itself. So maybe, things were figured out and things progressed. One of the coolest things is you get a much bigger variety of weapons, and you acquire those by collecting manuscript pages, which again offer plenty of world building. Once you do that, you can open a weapons case, pick up the weapon, and go with it. Some of them are really fun and overpowered, some of them not so, but the variety is there, and that's what I really like. And what's even better is your equipment now carries across level to level, which means that if you find that perfect weapon you like, pick it up and keep going with it. It's going to be a great ride. There was also a little bit of a change to the way the light system works. You no longer passively burn away the darkness when you aim at enemies with your flashlight. You actually have to focus it, which I actually like, because this forces you to use your batteries a bit more. On the other hand, even playing on Nightmare difficulty still, which you can do right off the bat this time, there's only normal Nightmare, I believe, the game is easier. And I think what it feels like is one of the biggest reasons it is so is because while there's a bigger variety of enemies and creativity, no one throws axes at you or other objects, except one enemy, but it's really easy to dodge. And I didn't really feel overwhelmed at any point. I've only died a handful of times, and they're only the moments where I decided like, okay, I'm gonna rush through this area and just like, you know, get things going. But other than that, it's a fun arcadey experience. Definitely feels more arcadey and feels a little bit rough around the edges. I'm not sure how the development looked like for this particular title, but it definitely feels more rough than the initial game, especially when talking to NPCs. The scripts there are interesting, to say the least. But where it really steps up is in its visuals. They're quite a big improvement from, maybe it's the setting, I'm not sure what it is, but it definitely feels sharper and cooler than Alan Wake. And I mean, of course, that game now looks better if you look at the remaster, which has since come out, and you know, it's a big upgrade. But is it an experience that I would say that you have to play? I don't know. I'm not sure how American Nightmare especially fits into the grand story. So maybe it is just one of those things that will be left and forgotten on the Xbox store and the PC, where you can get it on Steam or GOG is where I have it. And as a whole, I must say what brings, I think, the game together, and I might be biased here, but is the overall presentation. Even for a game that came out 13 years ago, on PC, it still looks great. There are moments where you just stop and stare and look, and it is stunning. And much more so in the remastered version. All the faces and animations that previously looked a little janky are now face captured, and they look much more natural. They look much better. Although I'm not sure how I feel about Alan's upgraded face. It looks a little weird, something a little wonky about it. I'm sure what it is. I prefer the old look more for some reason. And all that is really backed by an amazing soundtrack. The sound design, soundstage, the music is fantastic. Like I mentioned before, as you go through the settings, you will feel the wind rushing through the trees. You will hear every footstep of your enemy going through the bushes, ready to strike at any moment. It is an immersive experience. And one that could be a little bit creepy, especially when the wind picks up and you're not sure when the next attack might be coming from. And the musical choices, both in the base game, the DLC, and the American Nightmare, are fantastic. And I might be very biased here because Poets of the Fall stars as the gods of Asgard. And Poets of the Fall is my favorite band. It's a band that I first heard around the time of the first game's release, and I absolutely fell in love with. And knowing that they're here and they're such a big part of this game's world just brings a smile to my face. So, to sum it up, get this rant over and things over and done with, the game is older, but it ages surprisingly well, because what it's here to do is to tell a story, an engaging story with good twists and turns from start to finish. While some of it might have not aged so well, especially the collectible system, some of the animations, it is a good experience. And if you pick it up on one of its numerous sales, you can get the game pretty cheap on Steam, on Epic, on the PS Store and Xbox stores, and even recently the base game on Steam started in like Humble Bundle. Pick it up there, experience it, have fun with it, and at the very least, do yourself a favor and watch a in-depth video covering the story. They're usually like an hour or so long, going through what the story is about and delve into the second game. So, to wrap it up and go off with Alan's own words, this is not a lake, it's an ocean. An ocean of opportunities to come over to my Twitch and watch me play live and have a chat and share some of the other opinions. I don't know how good this video was and whether you enjoyed it, but if you did, drop a like. And I'll see you next time. Toby out. Bye for now.